Our premier corporate underwriter, one of our sponsors, is Sheridan Press. Sheridan Press prints our magazine. Bates Creative is a corporate partner. They do the cover design for the magazine. Imagination sponsored some things at the annual meeting. And today's sponsors are Nailer Association Services and Picture This Video. And we have a couple of minutes for them to introduce themselves and their organizations to the group before we get started. First off is John Kilchenstein of Nailer. John?
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate the opportunity to sponsor today's video on a budget. My name is John Kilchenstein from Nailer Association Solutions, and this is Aaron Weisberg. And for those of you who don't know, at a high level, Nailer provides a wide range of solutions for associations with really three key goals: to help build a more powerful association, to improve member engagement, as well as drive non-dues revenue. And our 5 solutions today are career, events, we have an AMS, we also have learning solutions, and our communication solutions, which Aaron and I represent. And our association advisor brand, we do a benchmarking survey each year, and Aaron has a few stats from what we've learned this year from over the 700 association executives who took the survey and responded about some of the video questions we had.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having us. My name is Aaron Weisberg, lead sales and project manager for Association TV, which is our Nailer's video content production and management system. So I work with all the associations on their video platforms and their projects. What John was alluding to earlier about the benchmarking survey that we did, 700 associations, about half of which have integrated video currently into their communications, another quarter of which are planning on integrating in the near future video communications. However, some of the metrics in the survey on the other end of how the members are interacting with the video content and how the associations are finding their return on investment from their video platforms are a little bit lower than we'd like to see, and that's what our responsibility is, to help the associations bring those numbers up. So thank you again for having us, and we're looking forward to the presentations.
Thank you.
Yes, Nailer is providing the lunch that we're having today and providing the video, which will be posted online soon if you want to review the session. And for people who couldn't make it here today, is Picture This Video. And Sharon Sobel, would you come up and chat for a minute about your organization?
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My company's been in business since 1997, and we focus on corporate and educational video, whether it's events or training messages, training programs similar to this. I do this a lot. And actually, it was interesting to hear what Nailer does, because they kind of fill in the puzzle piece that I'm always missing, and that is, I've made a great video for you. Now you need somewhere to put it and someone to track the marketing and the audience. So that's great that they're here too. I know that there's going to be a lot of great information from these guys, but one thing I just want to say is anybody that comes with the idea of making video, the whole idea of video on a budget is very interesting, because if you don't have a budget, you probably should not even be considering video. It's not that you need a huge budget, but you need something there. Basically, anyone, whether it's yourself or a company like mine, can work within a budget, but you've got to start with a number. It's sort of like buying a house. I don't like it when people come and say, I want to make a video, how much is that going to cost? That's like going to a realtor and saying, I want to buy a house, how much is that going to cost? Think of it the same way. Figure out what your number is, and then that company or yourself, after this great session, will be able to tie that down to understand what that video is going to look like based on your budget. that's it. If you guys want to learn more about me, I've got business cards outside on the table. But thank you very much for having me.
Let's thank our sponsors.
Storytelling. I'm going to introduce my colleague Brandon Ross, who's going to tell you a little bit about some techniques that you can use to make sure that your videos are not clicked off of in 10 seconds.
So my name is Brandon. I'm with the National Association of Cat Herders. No, I'm with the Military Officers Association of America, which is a military advocacy group out of Alexandria. And we have about 370,000 members across the nation, mostly who are older, typically white male veterans. That's pretty much our membership, right? So MOA brought me on back in 2011 as the video guy. And we've tried a lot of different things with video, and we're going to talk about some of the things that work, some of the things that don't work, look at some good examples and some bad examples. I'm a big proponent of storytelling, which has become a bit of a buzzword in the world of video. A quick word about what makes story a better way to convey your message. Story is personal. Humans have been writing stories on the walls of caves for 40,000 years. Think about your daily life, the music you listen to, the movies you watch, conversations with coworkers, friends, family. Usually those revolve around stories that we're telling each other, right? Stories trump lectures. Would you rather have a college professor that told you a story or lecture to you? Usually your favorite college professor was the one that wrapped the lesson inside a story, right? So when someone pitches a video idea, I'm sure you guys have heard this about the history of our organization, right? We've heard that before. Usually those videos tend to resemble lectures, right? If not done in a very specifically right way. They don't tend to be motivating. They don't tend to be very compelling most of the time. So what I'm here to talk about is finding your association story, which shouldn't involve a lot of additional cost, and using story to elevate your video, to make it more watchable and to make it more compelling, right? So a quick story about the video we're about to see. This is a short snippet of a longer video. When I first came to MOA, we were doing a lot of videos from our marketing department, kind of dictated. Our marketing department wanted videos that pushed people to join MOA, right? Put a big giant join button at the end of the video and said, join us. Not terribly successful, not centered around a story, right? So after we'd done 400 of those, I went to my director and I said, why don't we try something different? I've got an idea about just doing simple storytelling in video. We've got a lot of members out there with a lot of great stories. I'm traveling around covering these MOA events around the nation. What if when I went to an event in Tampa, I found 2 or 3 MOA members there who had great stories from their time in the service, and I sat down with them, captured their story, and put it together very simply, not in a flashy video, but focused on their story. And eventually, we get 10, 20, 30 of these, and we put these together. The rules are it has to be a MOA member. Another rule is that MOA is not going to be mentioned during the interview. And at that point, the people in our marketing department, their heads blew right off the back side. They didn't quite get that. But the point is, when you see this, all these stories together, what you take away from that, it's not a push for people to join. It's more of a nudge. And you're not even nudging them to join. You're nudging them to think MOA is an organization that cares about its members, that cares about capturing and preserving veteran stories for future generations. There's a kind of implied value there that you're not hitting people over the head with it. You're nudging them in that direction and implying it so that they think it's their own idea rather than it's something you're feeding them. So this is a very short snippet of one of those just to show you the technique of storytelling. And notice the very simple, it's a guy talking for a couple of minutes. We can go ahead and play. This is Bruner.
In March of 1938, I was sitting there reading a book or something, and I heard this roar sometimes individual aircraft did come over the building, but I knew this wasn't individual aircraft. Looked out the window, and there were these swarms of Luftwaffe aircraft coming overhead at very low altitude, and of course you could see the swastikas on the tails and all that. And I wish I could say this was completely surprise. It really wasn't, because we figured Hitler was going to try to take over Austria sooner or later. But, you know, when it actually happens, it's a surprise, and we knew it was bad news for us. A few days later, they sent me to a segregated school. It was all Jewish boys. Our housekeeper had to escort me. I was 8 years old, and to school and back, because they had these gangs of Hitler Youth that used to go around beating us up, you know. At that time, you came by ship, landed in New York. That's where most of the passenger ships went to. And so if you had no particular reason to go elsewhere, you stayed there. And anyhow, so I grew up there. In October '38, the first time I went on Riverside Drive in Manhattan, in New York, on Memorial Day, they had a parade. I saw this parade. I was 9 years old. And these people came, and they couldn't even keep in step, you know. I mean, the only ones who looked real sharp was the Corps of Cadets out of West Point. And I kept saying, oh my God. I said, if we're going to have a war, we better watch out, because, of course, I had seen the Wehrmacht, you know, the Germans, and let me tell you, they were not out of step. They were goose-stepping on those cobblestones. My family could understand that. Other people couldn't. But we knew pretty well what was going on during the war back there. And of course, like everybody else, we lost people from our families, you know.
Okay, so that's just a guy telling his story, and that's the beginning of it. He goes on to talk about how that experience pushed him to join the military, and he had a long, full military career after that. About that segment, it works for MOA's audience, because our audience loves nothing more than sharing their service experience stories and hearing other people's stories, right? They love that. At somewhere else, that might not be compelling enough, right? If your organization, if that doesn't speak to your members. For MOA, they have me as a full-time video producer, so that wasn't a lot of incurred cost on that. If it's something you're going to outsource, that might make more sense as a slideshow with some audio under it, right? What I think really comes across in that video is the emotion that he starts to show at the end of that clip, and that's something you get from video that you can't always get from stills or text or even sometimes audio. All right, we'll go forward here. Yeah, what you got? Sure.
So what I'd like to add here is that what's really compelling is that every person in this room is working for a built-in story machine, right? Associations are not like giant faceless corporations. They are conglomerations and groupings of people with similar interests. So, for example, at the American Nurses Association, we obviously have tons and tons of compelling stories of nurses that are helping people in the most difficult times in their lives. And I don't care what your association is. If it's the CPA Association, to CPAs, what they're doing, they're passionate about. They're really good at, and they enjoy the stories about their association's work. So you are in a very good position, no matter what association you're in, and trying to find these types of stories that Brandon is talking about and leveraging that into something that's going to really resonate with your members. It's just a matter of getting out there and talking to the members to get those stories and get them collected.
That's a great point, and finding the story is part of the challenge. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But finding the story, thinking you have a story, going to produce the story, and finding out it's not what you thought, it's not as compelling as you thought, and knowing when to say this isn't working is also part of the process that you have to be willing to kind of kill the story sometimes. Steps and considerations for the whole process. This is a quick list. Equipment right off the bat, finding the story, like I said, knowing the message, sticking to the message, whether you're going to storyboard it, script it, some kind of planning has to go into it. At the very basic, you should say, you know what, this needs to be a 30-second spot. How many times has someone from MOA come to me and said, we want just a really short, we want a short video. And then we put it together and it's 8 minutes long and they don't want to cut anything out of it, right? That's not, if you want a short video, make the commitment to, we're going to make a short video. We're going to make some tough cuts. We're going to make some tough edits, but it's going to be watchable because it's going to be 30 seconds long, right? Everything that's involved in production and post, and then don't forget, of course, you don't want to just dump it on YouTube, which happens a lot. You want some kind of a promotion plan for it. And after that, you want to evaluate the whole process and say, what can we do better next time? What can we improve upon? All that under project management, which is one of the most important parts of video production. Whether you're doing it in-house or whether you're outsourcing it, you have to manage that project. And if you're outsourcing it, you have to manage the vendor. You don't want to give them a bunch of stuff and hope they come back to you with something that is what you had in mind, right? I've seen a lot of money wasted on improperly managed products, improperly managed projects for video. All right, we're going to look at a bad example, and before we watch that, these are story killers, enemies of your video, a lack of context, no interesting characters, a slow narrative, bad audio or video, any one of those four. You can have 3 great and 1 that you're weak on. It kills your story. It takes the person out of the story. So we're going to watch an example of a decent subject. This is a story about some scientists at the University of Georgia who were studying the effect of hunting on the bear population there, right? Fairly interesting. And suppose they say, hey, we're going to have an actual, the body of a bear that had just been killed come in, and we're going to take measurements of it, and we're going to weigh it. That could be a compelling video, right? You have decent equipment. You have a decent camera. You have decent audio equipment. What could go wrong? A lot. Let's take a look at this, and then we'll talk about why it doesn't work. And we'll watch maybe just about half of this because we don't want to watch all of it.
I mean, they're study animals, and we expected this hunt, and, we knew that it was part of the process. So scientifically, you just have to go with it. You put a lot of work into these animals, and so to see them come in, it still gives us data, though. So there's that.
You're going to get opinions on both sides of the spectrum. One is that you can't hunt any of the bears, and the other is that we need to hunt them all, kill them all.
We're going to have a rug made or
see the bear? See the big old paws he's got. See the bear doing it?
Okay, I think we've seen enough. You get the idea of this video just does not work, right? Right off the bat, there's a lack of context. What in the world is going on? These people are pulling a bear out of the back of a truck. There's no context there. The video goes on for about a minute more. There are no interesting characters. I don't know if there is a narrative. The audio and video aren't awful. Some of the shots later on, you could tell they were working with a decent camera. They had the ability to capture decent audio. The failure of that video is in the skill of who, I forget who put it together. I'm glad I forgot where I got that from. But the failure is in putting it together, right? And who was operating the equipment. There was not an equipment failure because they hadn't spent enough money buying equipment. So the question becomes, how cheap is too cheap, right? How little can I spend to create good video? The answer is very simple. When poor production value distracts from your message, when people look at your video and it reflects poorly on the organization, when they don't get the message because they're straining to understand the audio, because you're out on a windy day and it's wind noise on the mic, when the person shooting it didn't use a tripod and the video's shaky and you get seasick from it, that's when you haven't spent enough money or you haven't learned enough skill to produce it, right? Obstacles for producing video in-house. These are some quick ones. I'm of the opinion equipment costs should not be an obstacle if you're producing it in-house. If you want to spend zero money, Joe had some ideas on that, I would suggest scraping up some money for equipment, right? The obstacle is the skill using that equipment. That's the obstacle. That's where you're going to fail 90% of the time. And that's where you're going to have to put time in, rather learning it yourself or finding someone who knows how to do it. Skill is the biggest obstacle. Finding the story is also an obstacle. Before we talk about pricing example, talking about finding the story, I'm a big fan of Ira Glass, radio storyteller. He does great work. This American Life, it's Serial, stuff like that. There's a series on YouTube, a 4-part series where he talks about the process he goes through. It's older now, but it still rings true. I'm going to play a short clip of him talking about finding the story and knowing when a story isn't working. And I play this at every chance I get because he has such good points. We can play the Ira Glass.
Like, one of the things I think that it's really hard that nobody ever tells you if you want to do creative work is how hard it is to actually find a decent story. And I think that we all think, like, well, the real work of it is I'm going to go out and I'm going to shoot the thing and then I'm going to sit and edit it and I'm going to write it and it's going to put music under it, like whatever, and that's going to be where time is. But often, and people don't really tell you this, often the amount of time finding the decent story is more than the amount of time it takes to produce the story. And that if somebody wants to do creative work, you actually have to set aside just as much time for the looking for stories. I mean, I work on a national radio show, and we don't follow the news, we don't do anything. All we do is look for interesting stories, and there's 7 of us or 8 of us now. And I gotta say, like, more than half of our week is simply engaged in the looking for stories and then trying stuff out. And, like, we're really good at our jobs, right? We're as good as, anybody who does this kind of thing. And I gotta say, like, we take around out a lot of stories, and between a half and a third of everything that we try, we'll go out, we'll get the tape, and then we kill it. And you should think of it the same way. That, like, you thought it was going to be good, you went out, you did the interview, the person wasn't such a great talker, they weren't so funny, they weren't so emotional. Somehow when they told it to you in person with the camera, it wasn't the way they told you when they talked to them on the phone beforehand. They just got a little intimidated by the camera. Just something in the chemistry was wrong. You can't even name what it is, and why even bother to try? But then when you look at the footage, you know that there's a feeling that you had about it, which isn't in the footage, right? And then it's time, at that point, to be the ambitious, super achieving person who you're going to be, and to kill it. It's time to kill, and it's time to enjoy the killing, because by killing, you will make something else even better live. And I think that, like, not enough gets said about the importance of abandoning crap. And one thing that you should know is that all video production is trying to be crap. Like, in fact, all radio production is trying to be crap. Basically, it's like the laws of entropy, that thing where, like, the universe is, all the energy of the universe is dissipating, and, like, all the atoms are getting lower and lower in energy. Well, basically, like, anything that you put on tape, from the moment you put it on tape, like, basically it's trying to be really bad. It's trying to be unstructured. It's trying to be pointless. It's trying to be boring. It's trying to be digressive, much like these sentences that I'm saying right here. And pretty much you have to prop it up aggressively at every stage of the way if it's going to be any good. Like, you have to be really, like, a killer about, like, getting rid of the boring parts and going right to the parts that are, like, getting to your heart. And you just have to be ruthless if anything is going to be good. Things that are really good are good because people are being really, really tough. And you're going to be really tough in doing it. And you're going to know also that, like, failure is a big part of success. Suddenly I sound like some Michael Jordan ad, but like, you know what I mean? Like you're gonna like run a lot of stuff and it's gonna go nowhere, and you should be happy about that. If you're doing that, you're doing it right. If you're not failing all the time, you're not creating a situation where you can get super lucky. And basically, like a lot of video and radio production, a lot of broadcasting is just in the purest way about luck. Like really, you just want to be in a situation where you're doing enough material, where you're doing enough interviews every week, where like you have put yourself on a schedule so that you know every week you're going to interview somebody about something. And through that, once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks, you're going to stumble on somebody who is so compelling and a story that's so great that it makes those other 5 weeks worth it. And I don't know, it's like people don't talk about this that much, that you have to kind of go into it knowing that you got to record and get rid of a lot of crap before you're going to get to anything that's special. And you don't want to be making mediocre stuff. You know what I mean? Like, that's not why anybody gets into this. The only reason why you want to do this is because you want to make something that's so, like, memorable and special. And that's what you want to do.
Okay, so that line about
one other thing that
video, the natural state of video is crap. It's so true. He says it much better than I could. So one other thing before I go, I've sat in on these before, and the question always comes up: how much should I expect to spend for X project, right? And it's my experience, there's always a reluctance to put a number on that. So here's what I did. I took a video I did several years ago for MOA. It was a quick 60-second spot. It was a promotional for one of our career fairs. And I sent that out to a mid-sized production company in Alexandria and said, how much would you charge us to shoot something like this and then to edit it? And they gave us a number. So I'm going to show you the clip, and then we're going to talk about how much that would cost if you outsourced it to a mid-size production house. So this is going to be career fair.
Really, what I particularly like about it is Mel has been able to bring in what I call business-friendly veteran organizations that are really interested in hiring veterans.
Okay, so it's a pretty simple shoot. It took about 4 or 5 hours of shooting that day and a couple of days of editing. So this is an estimate of how much you might expect to pay. If you're doing it in-house, obviously you've bought the equipment. That's your investment. You've got somebody who knows how to do it, so you're looking at 3 days of work. If you're outsourcing it, about $900 to shoot it, another $875 to edit it. It's estimated at editing hours being $145 an hour. There is a reason people get paid $145 an hour to edit. It is not an easy skill to learn, right? To do it well, to know how to pace, to know how to put together an audio track and put video on top of it and what works and what doesn't work. It's not easy. So I know editing hours are expensive, but there is a reason people get paid that much. I would put that at a mid-size price. Ways to reduce cost: work with a smaller production company, work with somebody who does production and another job and is looking for a side job to do. It's an easy way to reduce those costs. Think about trades. If you're doing coverage for an event, maybe they want they could use their company's logo around, and maybe they would knock off some money for that. Don't pay 100% up front. Do not pay 100% up front. Do not pay 100% up front. I have been in organizations that paid 100% up front in projects that I have not been able to be involved in, and they have gotten burned by the thousands, because when the first of 5 videos come in and you realize it's not usable, you've already paid for all 5. So you might as well get all 5 unusable videos. So I tend to think a fair thing is half up front, half upon completion, but everyone has their different price structures. Do as much as you can yourself. Provide them with the text, if you have photos you want in there. Anything you can shave off time for them to do is a good way. And then there's also the option of, if you have someone in-house who knows how to edit, have someone else shoot it, edit it in-house. You can save a lot of money that way.
And one of the things we should mention at this point is that don't just grab your favorite song off of iTunes and throw it onto your video. It's totally illegal, and BMI and ASCAP will sue you into oblivion. So do not do that.
Yeah. Good point. People have a misconception that internet means free, and that's not the case. Somebody did the work to produce that. You know, they should get their due. And that's it for me. So I guess we go on to questions.
Sure, we'll open it up for questions at this point. Yes, sir.
The staff at the office asked me to ask a couple of questions, one of which is about music. Do you have any recommendations if we don't have such skills on our staff, or we haven't found them yet, for where would be either low cost or free places to find music that can be used that's easy to search and rich?
Yeah.
So the question is about music, where to find low or no cost music.
Yeah, believe it or not, there are some low cost and even essentially no cost options out there. You have to be careful about them. If you do internet search for royalty free music, you should find some sites. What I did just to make sure is sometimes these licensing agreements are a little bit confusing. If you have in-house counsel or access to counsel on retainer, just to be sure, I would put whatever the license is for that music, have them take a look at it, and make sure that you have the right to use it. I've used stuff that has cost me very little or nothing.
And one other place that I would say to go to, again, you'll have to work out a deal with the artists themselves. But one of the biggest areas for non-signed musicians on the internet is Bandcamp.com. So one thing that you can do is go to Bandcamp.com and you can sort by genre. So let's say you need some ambient music, to go behind something. You can actually sort by ambient and find something you like, and actually get in touch with the artists themselves and work out some sort of a deal with them. A lot of artists will be happy to work with you on something like that. But again, they own the copyright to that, so you can't just pull it off there. You need to work with them to do it. But that's one of the ways that the internet has made it easier to source this type of thing, because, like we were saying, you may have somebody on staff. I think both of us play guitar and probably do the music for our own videos. But if you don't know anybody personally, this is a way to find people that do make music, and a lot of the quality is super awesome. I mean, it's very high quality on there. So.
I would back to one other thing to the music. When I came on Amoa, they were paying a yearly fee for a production house, and it was kind of use all you want, but we were going to pay a few $1,000s a year, and we switched from that to just buying music per use. The site we use is audiojungle.net. And it's kind of one of these things, people make music, people upload it, and then you can search and decide whether you want it. And depending on the licenses, some pieces of music are $5. If you're going to use a more advanced license, it may be a little under $100.
And I will add that you should check with, if you're in a larger association, you should check with your meetings department, because a lot of the times your meetings department will already have a licensing agreement with ASCAP or BMI. So maybe you can use some of those bigger songs that you've heard on the radio as part of their agreement. Because when you have a conference, for example, and they're playing music over the intercom, they have to have an agreement in order to be able to do that. So you may be able to work it into that agreement as well. But again, just be careful, be legal, and you should be good to go. Yes, sir.
Hi, one suggestion for that, YouTube actually has a free audio library as well, just to check that out as well. A lot of artists put music on there, and you can find instrumentals just to use for free. Just a suggestion.
Just one other thing to think about. I'm aware of at least one project where you have to be aware of how the licenses affect each other. So there was one project where there was voiceover, there was music, and there was stock footage. And the voiceover license lasted for a certain amount of time. And once that time expired, then the voiceover rights were gone. Well, the music rights lasted as long as the video didn't change. So once the voiceover rights were gone, you had to change the video, which meant the music rights fell apart also. So just be aware that these things can be intertwined. Right?
Any other questions? Yes, sir. Are you going to make the presentation available? Yeah, we will make the presentation available through AMMP's website. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
What kind of camera did you use in the MOA interview?
So I shoot with right before I came to MOA, they invested very heavily in a Nikon DSLR. To my disappointment, once I came on board. If I could go back and switch that to Canon, I would, because Canon is obviously the leader in DSLR video. But that was a Nikon D7000. We have two of those, which is the point Patrick and I talked about, the equipment list. Having two, just double that equipment list. Having two of everything on that equipment list is a good idea to shoot for, right? That was shot on a Nikon D7000 with, I think it was a kit lens, probably 3 lights. And when you shoot on a DSLR, DSLRs are notoriously bad for audio. So you're capturing your audio completely separate on a separate device. On a Marantz was the device I was used to capturing that, and it's just like a box you hook up. There's this one right here, Patrick's, that you hook up to a microphone and then pin it on there. Bill.
What kind of, was it just a basic lavalier mic?
It was a Sony lavalier mic, and it wasn't a cheap one. I think they run about $200 or $300. But, you know, the thing about video, if it's going to live online, it doesn't always make sense to have a $500 microphone sometimes to capture your interviews, right? Sometimes, I hate Radio Shack, but a $10 microphone from Radio Shack sometimes will do the job, right?
And I think one of the issues there is you have to be aware of where the final product is going to go. 90% of the time, if you're going online, that's great, but just if there's 10% of the time that you're going to show it at a conference on a giant 40-foot screen, then just be aware that that's where you really want to make sure that you are using the high-end stuff. And the DSLRs, I mean, they have some real advantages in terms of light. They are very sensitive to light, and that's great. In general, they're not well suited to interviews. You can work around them, but they have a time limit. Most of them is about 20 minutes. And then they'll shut themselves off, and they get too hot. So if you want to sit there and do an hour-long interview, they're not well suited to that. And then, as Brandon said, you're going to capture the audio separately. That means that you have to sync up the audio and the video later in the production. Now, it's not that hard to do once you know it, but if you're already a little bit intimidated by editing, that's one of the first steps. It's never going to sound right unless you sync it up. And the easiest way to sync up a video is you have the person in front of the video, clap, make sure that they're in front of the lens, and then you've got a visual that you tie to the audio. There's a spike on the audio track, and it's not hard to do once you know how to do it.
Hi, so I do a lot of interviews, and I do a lot of interviews where we actually have to turn them around day of. So it's a lot of, it's more content rather than quality. However, I do have a little studio that I have finally talked them into painting the walls not red, and that's been the biggest achievement that I made. Do you guys have any suggestions of how to make the space just seem a little bit more professional whenever you are moving quickly?
I sympathize with you turning those stories around. We were talking about, I used to work in TV news where you show up at 8 o'clock in the morning and they give you 4 stories you know nothing about, and you come back at 5 o'clock and you have to be an expert on all 4 of those. So I don't miss it, and I sympathize with you. We have a small video studio at MOA that is a room that they were very generous when I first came on board, and they said, tell us what you need to make this work. Luckily, it's a long room, so I can be at one end and shoot towards the other end, and it makes the space seem a little longer, get a little better depth of field, that type of thing. We've set up a system with a rod in the back where you can change backdrops pretty easily. and those can be, sheets, or you can they have some really nice wrinkle-free backdrops that you can change very quickly. I would say backdrop, camera placement, and your lighting. All three of those, you could work with all three of those to make that work.
Yeah, I had a studio also, and it can be a challenge. One of the most flexible things you can do if you want a lot of options, you get green screen paint. If you've got a flat wall, you paint the wall with the green screen paint. In front of that, you put a backdrop, and that's whatever color backdrop you want. And then they do sell at B&H. It's like a shower curtain that you install on the ceiling, and you have another backdrop. And that way, you can pull one backdrop in front of the other really quickly. I think, like Brandon said, you can use the lights. If you throw a plant in there, it doesn't take much because your field of view is typically pretty narrow when you're shooting an interview. And then the last thing is, if you have a gray backdrop, you can turn that into anything. Do you know what a gel is? Yeah. So if you gel your lights, a gel, for those who don't know, use a regular light that's white, and a gel is basically a colored piece of plastic that goes in front, and it makes that light whatever that color is. So a red gel makes the light red. If you have a gray backdrop, a flat backdrop, and you point a red light at it, it becomes red. Whatever color you point at it, it becomes. So that gives you some flexibility. Now, I will tell you, having done a whole lot of them, at some point it doesn't matter what color it is, it gets boring.
B&H is as well.
B&H Photo Video is a website. It's up in New York. They're phenomenal if you do decide to get the gear and produce content in-house. My suggestion for you is sign up for their deal of the day. And every day they'll put something on sale, and sometimes it'll be something you don't care about at all, and sometimes it'll be exactly what you want. This audio recorder goes for about $180. I got it for $100. So I've gotten a lot of photography equipment and other equipment that way. You just kind of keep an eye on it, and you'll get a good price.
One of the things I would add to make this a B&H commercial, maybe we'll get free stuff, is one of my favorite things about going to B&H online. It's like a kid, and I can't go to there and not want to buy something. They have a great product review section on almost every product they have has been reviewed by not just people who bought it, but people who have been using it for years, and they'll tell you it lists pros and cons, what it's good for, what it's not so good for. It's incredibly valuable. I use that when looking at equipment to purchase for bnhphoto.com. Is that what it is, bhphoto.com?
And, of course, for the real super budget conscious, there's always Craigslist. I mean, photographers are serious about being early adopters for the most part. And so you can find totally last year's completely state-of-the-art cameras and equipment on Craigslist for super giant discounts, and they work totally fine. So obviously, buyer beware, just like any Craigslist deal. I just watched a crazy movie about a horrible Craigslist experience last night. But, go with a friend, and you can find some good deals on there.
Along those lines, another site is Adorama, ADORAMA, and they've got some really good deals too. And both of those sites do sell used equipment, and those can be really good deals. And unlike Craigslist, you have a reputable organization that will list for you. They will rate what kind of shape this equipment's in. So you can look at that and say, okay, this is an 8 out of a 10. This is worth my money. That's a 6 out of a 10. Or they'll tell you this doesn't work, but you can use it for parts. So that's another option for the used equipment.
I'm going to make one more plug for video editing software. We had talked about that. One other option, and it's an option I used at a newspaper I was working at before I came to MOA. It's a piece of software called Adobe Premiere Elements. And I got there and they had that, and I thought, oh, geez, what? Because I think I was using Avid before that, and it's about $70 at Walmart, right? It's a very low-end, entry-level piece of software. But there was nothing I wanted to do that I couldn't do with that software. We were doing simple edits for newspaper news stories, but it was very versatile, and it is a great entry level if you're going to stick with Adobe. The learning curve from that to Adobe Premiere Pro, which is much more advanced, it's a lot easier than moving maybe from iMovie or Final Cut to Premiere Pro. It's called Adobe Premiere Elements. I don't think it's on I think you have to purchase it. It comes with a lower level Photoshop type of program too. But I looked it up yesterday. It's on their website. You can download it, $69.
Are there any more questions? No, well, thank you all for coming. Let's thank our speakers, Joe and Patrick and Brandon. And let's thank our sponsors who made this day possible.